joined SaaStock a little while ago and are part of their founder circles. It's been absolutely brilliant for us. We first came into it to further our community, our reach, our network, and to learn from some of the world-class speakers that SaaStock has come and speak. And I have to say, it has been absolutely superb for us.
Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. I'm your host, Alex Theuma, and delighted to be joined today by Øyvind Reed, who's the CEO of Whereby. Welcome, Øyvind.
Many thanks, Alex. It's great to finally be on, and thanks for having me and being patient with me.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you on the podcast. For our listeners, we've been perhaps sort of speaking to Øyvind on and off for a little while now. You spoke at one of our virtual conferences, or maybe one or two of our virtual conferences during the pandemic, but we got to meet in person finally, I would say March or April of this year at SaaSiest, and had a great chat, enjoyed that. And after that, we tried to get you on the podcast. We're doing it now, a few months later, but I'm excited for it. It's good because we've had the opportunity to have a bit of a conversation prior to this. So we've got sort of like more insights into into yourself and things that you're passionate about and the story of Whereby. So super helpful, in preparation for our conversation.
Awesome stuff. I look forward to it.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, Øyvind, why don't we start? Why don't we tell the audience who is Øyvind Reed?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I started my career outside of tech. Always been fascinated by sort of sales and commercial models, etc. But like I said, started outside of tech. I was actually selling seafood for quite a while, which is a very Norwegian thing to do. But in 2010, I was approached and asked if I wanted to be the VP of sales at a startup called VideoNord, which was sort of like the first beginning of the company that I'm running now. And in 2011, I was asked by the board if I would step in as the CEO. And I did, and that's basically what I've been doing ever since, and seen multiple ups and downs during the course of my career building this company. Outside of work, I'm very passionate about football. I'm an Arsenal fan, as you can potentially see from the flag back there. And right now that is causing me a lot of good memories, but it hasn't always been like that. I also like exercising. Doing my road bike and also running is quite something that I really enjoy when I find time for it.
We have something in common in that I'm an Arsenal fan as well. And as you say, it's, we've had quite a few years of, really nothing to celebrate or enjoy, and quite a lot of pain. But I think we've seen things started to get a little bit better, and certainly right now, couldn't be much better because we're top of the league after 3 games. But it is only 3 games, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. But
indeed,
it's good signs. Good signs. Let's celebrate whilst we're at the top.
That's what we have to. And my partner always says that I'm 42 years old now, and still she can see it on my face when Arsenal are doing well compared to when they're losing. So yeah. It still impacts my overall mood.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think for every football fan, particularly sports fan, if you have a team, if your team loses, it can ruin your whole day. And you mentioned you're Norwegian. I see the map behind you. Where are you in Norway right now?
Yes, I am. So I live on the west coast of Norway. It's a beautiful place to be. It's very safe and very nice for raising a family and for my kids. We have a lot of family here. This is the place where I was born. And having lived quite a few other locations for a while, we decided to settle here long term. So for me, I also enjoy traveling and seeing other places, but being here sort of like as a steady state works well for me and my family. So the west coast of Norway is great for that.
Awesome, good stuff. Well, I've never been to Norway. I'm half Finnish. I spent a lot of my summers in Lahti growing up anyway, and a bit of time in Sweden, but yet to come to Norway. But certainly plan to do it.
If you ever come, let me know, and I'll take you to see the fjords. They're stunning, especially in the summer. It's really nice. So let me know, and I'll take you.
We'd love to, and we could talk about Arsenal as well.
Yeah.
But what about the story of Whereby then? I mean, starting back, so you joined in 2011. It had a different name, I think, sort of back then. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about the story of Whereby, also like what it does as well?
Absolutely. So let me start with the story first, and then I'll dive into what we do today. Because, like I said, I've been working in this industry now of video conferencing for over a decade, and our sort of like history is not a straight line up into the right kind of scenario that investors likes to see, right? There's been a lots of ups and downs, and we started a company back in 2010 that grew very, very nicely. This was actually pre-Zoom and some of the bigger players that have since come to market. But at the time, we were fully bootstrapped. So we were basically investing what we made every year into technology and building that out. A big lesson for me was that was too slow. We should have really fueled it at that time, just because there was a much bigger market for us to grab with the technology that we had at the time. However, as I saw that we started falling behind from a technology perspective, we decided in 2018 to acquire a technology that was actually lodged inside of the largest Norwegian telco, Telenor. So we spun that out, got the technology and a huge amount of talented people that since then became and developed into what is Whereby today. At the time, it was called Appearin, so some of the listeners might have actually used that.
Mm-hmm.
But we made it into Whereby together as a team, joining forces of two companies, basically. So it's been lots of ups and downs. And today we basically offer two products in the market. One that most people know about that have used Whereby is what we refer to as Whereby Meetings, which is basically the service that competes with Zoom and Microsoft Teams and Google Meet. But then we also offer something called Whereby Embedded, where we allow customers to take our platform and embed it and integrate it into their own apps and workflows, so they can offer great video conferencing capabilities to their users, but in a use case that is not predominantly sort of like business to business scenarios, but much more rather a company needing to do support for customers, for instance, or telemedicine or events and that kind of scenario.
Very cool. I remember had used it a few times, and then also conscious about seeing that Appearin then became Whereby, but I wasn't really kind of following it in the details to how that happened. What data can you share about the company? So like, how many people is Whereby? You obviously bootstrapped, but you mentioned that I think you mentioned that you've now raised capital. How much have you raised? Yeah, any revenue, or what can you share about the company? Just get the audience a bit of a picture of where you are.
Yeah, and in order for that to make sense, I'll share some of the up until COVID hit, we were mainly bootstrapped, I would say. Like, we had some small angel checks, but nothing big. Upwards of $500,000 raised at the time. But we, during COVID, exploded onto the scene, right, and started growing massively. So we quickly grew from probably around 20 people to upwards of 100 at the highest level. So we were sort of like really riding that wave of the surge and just the pure demand that was generated in the market and the acceleration that we saw through COVID. Since then, a lot of the sort of, call it the crazy growth has gone down. You've probably seen Zoom has been also struggling. Many of the other providers on their usage have gone down, and Whereby has been hit by that as well. So we are currently down to 35 people, between 35 to 37 roughly. So it's been a hard sort of like last 12 months where we've had to make multiple changes to the business strategy and just go back to being a functioning company without needing to consistently raise venture capital, right? What's happening, like they're now using terms like default alive, etc. And that's basically what we've had to do as a consequence. So we haven't raised any capital since we raised around in 2021. Late 2020. So we haven't raised anything since then. And now we want to move forward as a sustainable company as a consequence. We're roughly doing $8 million of ARR So in sort of like all the hardships, the good news is that we have strong, steady revenue that we can continue to build on. So
Yeah.
I feel for a lot of founders and people that I know that are now really struggling because their businesses are going under as a consequence. We have, call it the benefit of being able to pull it down to break-even levels.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that. And obviously, I mean, unquestionably, must have been very tough. You know, going from like 100, down to 35, and we'll touch on that, in a bit. But obviously, I think, certainly at the time, whereby in yourself, we're doing the right things. You had the demand, you raised the venture capital. It's like shoot for the opportunity. Obviously, I think, also at the time it was, probably sort of like still like, growth at all costs and, growth over profitability. But then given that, I think, there has been this sort of like reset and, the demand has certainly, the COVID demand has certainly like disappeared. And we've seen, like you said, the companies that really, really thrived during COVID, and there's been so many of them, especially in SaaS and Zoom and Hop-ins and so on, they've all followed that similar strategy, kind of, raise as much capital as they can, shoot for that growth, make the hires. Post-COVID, the demand isn't there, and actually, well, we now have a whole market correction in SaaS, right? So, yeah, it's not necessarily only the companies that really thrived and benefited from the pandemic, but in general, like every business in SaaS is now going for operational efficiency rather than growth at all costs and having to make these adjustments.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And overall, I think in long term, I think it's good to get this correction, right? Because I've been in this game for a very long time, and what happened during sort of like late 2019, 2020, and 2021, I think you and I can both agree was out of like it doesn't make any sense, right? When you saw valuations and companies raising multiple rounds in a year, for instance, that was always the outlier. That wasn't the norm. And I'm speaking to a lot of founders now that I help mentor that have only seen that, and so they're really struggling to get into the mindset of that time. In my opinion, is not coming back anytime soon, right? Like we have to reset and rethink the way we build our companies, and that's hard because you've been used to something and taken that for granted, and then suddenly it so like does a complete 180 on you, and changing your head and the mindset is hard. And especially when you have to bring a whole business with you on that journey.
Given you were bootstrapping and had a really solid business before you raised venture capital, which attracted this, I think, $10 million Series A from Point Nine and others, was there a lot of internal debate, maybe internal soul searching with yourself, and then with the co-founders and the board, if there was a board at the time, about actually going down the VC route rather than remaining as a bootstrap company? So if you can take us back to that time, like, 2020, was that like, was it really just, hey, this is the opportunity, would be crazy not to take it, it's Point Nine capital, or was there a lot of discussions and people pro and against raising?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, right? And I think any advice I share here is obviously based on my own experience, so the listeners would have to take it for what it's worth, right? But there's no doubt that my previous experience led me to thinking differently this time around, right? I mentioned earlier that I failed to raise fast enough and really put some capital behind it when we were on a great growth trajectory last time. So in my head, I was always thinking, if that chance comes back, I'm definitely going to grab it. So that was part of it. The second thing was that we were growing so fast at that time that it would almost be irresponsible for me when looking at the shareholders in order to maximize the value not to ride that wave, because it was impossible to say what would happen after. You were just looking at every company that we were competing with were investing a lot and riding this wave. So like perfect hindsight, yes, we could have done things differently. But at the time, in my opinion, I would love to speak to the founder that said, no, I'm not doing this at this time, right? So there are, you can always have regrets. I very often, in my opinion, I never regret what I've done. I sometimes regret what I didn't do. So that's my mentality. And at the same time, This was when I started speaking to Christoph Jantz, and I've always had a massive admiration for him and for Point Nine. And when they came and said that they would like to invest, for me, there wasn't really, that was kind of part of what I wanted to be a part of and try and see how we could make it and take it to the next level. So those three reasons were basically what ended up making that decision easier, in my opinion, rather than more complicated.
Makes sense. And now from, I guess, being bootstrapped to being venture backed, now you're still venture backed, but operating the business as if it was bootstrapped again.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit? I mean, we've kind of a little bit sort of touched on it, and, you know, in terms of the market has really kind of shifted and demand, etc. But yeah, like talk us a little bit sort of through that, and, you know, now what's the rate, you know, the things that you've had to do to kind of, you know, get this back as operationally efficient business.
Yeah. And so first of all, it's extremely challenging for the team, right? My colleagues, there is no doubt, as you're a founder, I'm a founder. And so it's our job to be 2, 3, 4 months ahead of everything else, right? And I have seen that this shift might potentially happen. And so I've had time to digest it, think about it, strategize it, and then start to execute on it. My team members obviously don't have, call it that luxury, right? They haven't been part of those conversations. So when we have to do this, it's a shock to the system. There is no doubt. It's a shock to the people that I unfortunately have to let go. And it's equally shocking to the people that are behind and who wants to be here for the long run and wants to go again and rebuild. So that's a very, very important part of a process like this that I don't think you can overestimate how complex that is to navigate. And so right now I'm spending a lot of my time with the team that is remaining and being optimistic about the future, right? Because I've told them that there are basically two ways we can do this. One, we can moan and we can suffer and we can be depressed about what has happened. Or, in my opinion, the only way you can do it is to approach the market with optimism and positivity and say, I believe that we can do this. Let's move forward as a team. Let's try whatever we can to solve the challenges ahead of us. And in my opinion, there's also some benefits of being bootstrapped or not needing to do 200% growth year on year, is that you can actually afford to build a great product in what, for our case, definitely is a downturn in market. We have a consumption-based model. Many of our customers are suffering through what we've seen lately, and so our revenue suffers as a consequence. But there is still strong usage there. There is still showing the right motions moving forward. So there is plenty to be optimistic about, but going through that process and then trying to motivate the team is obviously a challenge, and probably the biggest challenge I've had as a leader in close to 12 years of doing this now.
Yeah, I can relate to it, as I'm sure many founders listening can, you know, as well. And whilst, well, certainly with parallels in terms of, you know, what's happened at SaaStock, and we weren't venture backed, but we were a growth business that had, 24 employees sort of pre-COVID. And then during COVID in 2020, we had to scale down to 9 people and motivate the team, through what was, very difficult times, because you're taking the core product of the business, which was in-person conferences, which was what pretty much everybody that was hired into the business came into and what they were looking forward to. And, some of the people came because we had international conferences. We were doing 5 conferences in 5 continents, and they were looking forward to going to Australia and Brazil and, these sort of things. And it's like, oh, well, we can't do that anymore. And we're not doing in-person conferences. And what you've been hired for, you kind of have to, just slightly shift and adapt. And we're going to be doing, virtual conferences for the foreseeable. And yeah, definitely, like, motivating the team was, really, really challenging. And, I tried sort of motivational speeches and kind of every day, and sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't, and getting out of bed, it was like, what are we going to be faced with today? And, the team have kind of faced, were burnt out, and ENPS was like really down. And, there's certain members of the team, were just couldn't really get out of the funk, and were probably bringing some others down, and so on. But it was just like overall a very kind of challenging year. At the end of it, we had 9 people left within the business. that, were really kind of passionate about the future, of SaaStock, the mission, the vision. They earned their stripes, and we kind of got through that, the most difficult period of my sort of tenure, as founder and CEO. And then 2021, it was a little bit easier. A bit of the load was easier because we got through that. We proved that we could weather the storm, with the right people. And after that, it was like, well, okay, we've got through this. The rest of the 2021 should be a lot easier, and it was. Now we're back to growth and bringing new people in, and so we've gone through the ups and then the downs, and the ups are coming again. So it's a good feeling, and I think it's very typical for many many entrepreneurs. You just don't really hear about it that often, so it's good that we can speak about it.
I think this is exactly the point, right? We have to normalize this, because that is, for most companies, this is the norm. We always get fed and hear the crazy success stories, and we think that if we're not doing that, then we fail and we suck and we shouldn't be CEOs and we shouldn't be founders and we shouldn't be building a company. The whole truth is that most go through the similar journey that you've gone through, that I've seen in the past. This is not the first time we have struggled, and I've had much closer sort of like near-death experiences than I am currently, right? So it sounds like a cliche, but it isn't always up and to the right, and it is a marathon, and it's hard, grueling work. And we should start normalizing that, because only then can we educate each other as founders. Only then can we really be helpful to each other. If we're all just on Twitter and showing everyone how we're crushing it and how cool we are, and we're building in public until things start going the wrong way, and we're just buying into the hype, and we're just like, we're not providing any real value.
Yeah,
those are all sorry.
No. I agree, but it's like, and I don't think more founders should do it. I don't think it's necessarily so difficult. I recall that in 2020, I wrote a piece, like it was like, I don't know, it was Diary of a CEO in a Pandemic. I can't remember what it was called, but it was published in VentureBeat. And it was just kind of like, I was just talking about what's happened. And I was I was an open book, and I was transparent. And we've got some small like angel investors. Christoph Jans is actually one of them. And we published it, and one of the investors kind of reached out and said, well, I don't think you should be speaking like, like so honestly about what's happening and these negative things, et cetera. I was like, well, this is actually what's happening, right? I'm not going to, just like bullshit and say, hey, everything's great. We're having the best year ever. But so, yeah, it was just kind of interesting. And like most people actually kind of gave good feedback about the article. But, one particularly said like, probably shouldn't be sharing. So you shouldn't be so vulnerable, kind of like online.
Thanks for sharing that. I think this is hugely something we should probably do another episode on. This is that relationship between founders and investors. Like, I would much rather, and I deeply appreciate our investors. I really do, and I have a huge amount of respect for them, and I know that they have a challenging job as well. But I would much rather have positive feedback from my peers, the people that are facing what I am facing on a day-to-day basis, than having an investor say, well, I think you're being too vulnerable. I think you're being too honest. All right, I hear that. That to me is an opinion. I don't necessarily agree with it. I would much rather see, if I get that feedback from other peers, other founders, then I'll take it to heart and say, yeah, maybe you're right. We shouldn't be talking about this. But I have a feeling, and based on my conversations, everyone is really wanting to have these conversations and be open and honest about what this is, because it doesn't mean that we will sit down and feel sorry for ourselves and not go to work. Quite the opposite. I think it actually has a positive impact. It doesn't mean that you will just go negative and start thinking that everything is going down the toilet. Yeah. I believe that it actually has the way to get you out of this and motivate you, because what you'll see is that we all suffer the same things. We have imposter syndrome. We feel that we are underprepared to do this job. We're constantly being uncomfortable in our role. And it's one of the few roles where you constantly have to challenging yourself to do things that you don't know how to do. Many other roles you can grow into, and then you start crushing it because you're doing more or less the same things and you become really good at it. The role of a CEO is to always be sort of like right at the edge of the line of what you can actually do. And I think that makes it a different role compared to many others.
Yeah, 100%. And what I find, and when I was listening to that, when we got together or met at SaaSiest, and we had these, kind of like, we'd never met in person, but we'd spoken online, and we were just, two CEOs having a conversation, open and, and honest. And what I find is at conferences or just like, when founders get together in person, retreats or whatever, like, this is when they kind of like open up and like, hey, you have this problem too, and you've got some people issues, and how is this going? And but there isn't that, because of the way, as you say, like online, everybody's talking about how great the business is doing. Sometimes just like founders, they don't have that opportunity to really kind of like talk and share and just be open and honest. So I think like part of it online is a facade, right? You're just kind of showing like how great, this is what you're supposed to do and supposed to say, but like when we're in person, this is how it really is, right? And so we need to kind of get more of it online with like, hey, actually, this is how it really is, and just don't wait for those 1 or 2 opportunities a year to get together with founders and just to really kind of just see if you've all got the same problems or not.
Yeah. And like I said, I think that's when you have true value creation. I don't want to be phony. I don't want to say to everyone that life is hunky-dory, we're crushing it, when I know I have team members that are being let go and it's soul-crushing to them. And that's important for me to state when I said being the CEO is difficult, right? We also have to let people go, and it's much harder on them than it is on us. So we should be very careful not to sort of like take the victim role here. But I care about us as founders being able to speak openly and engaging with each other, because after our conversation at SaaSiest, that left me feeling energized. We basically just shared our sort of like our deepest thoughts and what we were struggling with, and boom, it for me at least, it releases a whole amount of energy, because like I'm not alone. Alex has gone through much harder times than me during the last 12 months. So I can relate, I can understand, and we can be empathetic to each other. I'm sorry it's a bit of a pet peeve for me, but I shouldn't be.
No, it's all good. But then for you as CEO, what has been the impact on your mental health? You said, it's certainly been one of the most challenging times for you leading whereby. So, yeah, what has been the impact for your mental health, and how have you managed that?
So I think to me there's a tremendous amount of tapping into my own experience. I think right now I really value that I've gone through tough times before. I know I have the resilience built up in me to say, I'm not giving up. I'm going to start over. And hearing your story, for instance, Alex, right? That means something to me, because that's where we have to go back to now. We are basically in some ways the situation that you were in during COVID. And now you're back 2 years later, stronger than ever. There is a company called Travel Perk. I don't know if you know them. Hugely impressive what they did during what was basically, you should think was the end of them, right? Just as COVID started. They're now back to growing faster than ever, right? It's extremely motivating when you see that. So for me, tapping into my experience and allowing myself to feel that I can turn this around and I'm still the right person to do it is important. And potentially also, I told one of my colleagues on the executive team that we have to forgive ourselves, right? Yes, we made mistakes during when scaling the company as we did. But if we go around blaming ourselves for that forever and apologizing for it forever, we're not good to anyone. Then we should just resign and leave our chairs to someone else. But just being open with yourself and say, yeah, forgive yourself, move on, think about the future and what you can actually do to help fix the situation that you're in, has huge impact on my mental health overall. And then it's the basics, right? Some would call it cliches, right? But for me, exercising, we talked about this, right? Having enough exercise and having a free space. 2 days a week, I train my son's football team, and that disconnects me from work. Like, I leave my phone and people know that those 2 hours I'm unavailable. And I worry about coaching a 14-year-old kid on how to receive the ball and how to give a great pass to someone else. Completely, when I go back to work after that, I feel energized, right? I feel different. And then just basic stuff like, again, sleeping enough, taking care of yourself. So I think these are all things that we all know about, And so why are they so hard for us to then implement, right? Imagine yourself, Alex, if one of your key employees comes to you and say, hey, I'm borderline burnt out. I need to take care of myself. Can you help me do it? You would put everything in place to make sure that that person was treated properly, that he would come back, he or she would come back fully recharged and energized, right? But we're still struggling to do it for ourselves. It makes no sense. I heard one founder say it's like the again on the airplanes when you put on your own mask before you help others, and that's sort of like just a good thing to remember in all this.
Yeah, no, definitely true. All of that, and for me, I'm aware that like I have a holiday. Or my last couple of years, it's been like pretty much having a holiday once every 6 months. But by the end of that 6 months, I'm pretty burnt out, tired. Kind of veering on a little bit on the kind of the negative side, and just really kind of yearning for that holiday. I take the holiday, surprise, I give myself some space. I feel fully recharged. I come back, I'm full of energy for the next 6 months. And then I always say to myself, well, I shouldn't wait so long, to kind of like take a break and kind of have this 6 month sprint. It's a long, kind of sprint without a break. So I've made a conscious effort, because I've been saying this to myself without doing anything. And there are other factors to consider, like obviously taking a holiday, certainly if you're going abroad and with a family, it costs, a bit of money, right? So yeah. There are kind of financial considerations, unless you want to stay at home, which I never really find too much of a vacation, because you're having a break from work. But I get a bit bored. But now coming back from my recent holiday, I've booked in some time, in I think sort of like end of October, to have a quick short break, and then hopefully at the end of the year I'll manage to have something as well. And hopefully for me, I'll be more impactful and like certainly feel better and be able to give more to the business. If I'm giving myself a break and giving myself that opportunity to recharge. And we say it to our colleagues on the most part. My team members are fairly, pretty good at that. And I'm probably, one of the worst at actually like taking a vacation. Yeah. So I kind of need to be better. And so, putting that mask on and leading by the front and, taking more time off and showing that, it's a good thing. We all need it.
There is no doubt in my mind. And I'm fortunate to have, it's sort of like same thing that you mentioned. I have some very, very strong people on my executive team. And as a team, they pulled me aside and said, Øyvind, you're not sharp. You're not where you normally are, because you are borderline burnt out. You need to take time off just like everyone else at this company. And hearing that from them sort of like really, really hit home, because I thought I was really contributing, but they were saying, no, you're just not as crisp and as sort of like clear-minded that you normally are. You need to take some time off. And so thank God I had people around me to sort of like point it out to me. I should know better, but apparently I don't when it comes to my own mental health, right?
Yeah. No, well, it's good to have the leadership team in place and your colleagues in place to kind of point that out. So that's good stuff. And you mentioned that you mentor some founders. You obviously speak to a number of founders, I think, through your network, maybe through the the 0.9 sort of network as well. What else are you seeing in the market that maybe are solutions for overall better health for better mental health of founders? I mean, are you seeing anything like beyond obviously what we discussed in terms of like people should be exercising, taking holidays, sleeping well, etc.?
I think, and again, it's not rocket science, right? Like we always keep coming back to the basics. I think having people that you trust and that you can talk to and that you actually dare being vulnerable with, I think is probably the one thing I see that has the biggest impact. That's when you get, when you finish a call and then 20 minutes later you get a WhatsApp message saying, wow, that was helpful. Just someone listening and someone being there for me and allowing me to vent, be frustrated, etc. Right? That message always comes back, because that's what people actually need. That's what other founders, I think, are looking for. So having that group of other founders that you can trust, that you can actually talk about these things, because very often we don't always talk about the negatives. Like keep in mind, most of the time we always find that's where it starts. But then very quickly it goes into what could we do differently? What could help? What could be? So you leave on a high. You leave feeling energized from those conversations. So I would say for me, that is always the key thing that keeps coming back. Make sure you have a strong list of people that you trust, that always are available to you, and that always can give you encouragement when you feel it, because very often that's actually what you need. And it's difficult to do that with a board member, right? Because we all have insecurities and we don't want to let them know that we might not have everything figured out. And it's so strange to think about, because I found that the best investors have been operators or built companies themselves. So they would actually be very often a huge source of support. I'm lucky enough to have Christoph, that has been amazing. Harry Stabbings is another person that I've had a great privilege of getting to know, and I see more as a friend than an investor at the moment, right? But finding those people that you can actually build a relationship with. And I guarantee you, this is a piece of advice. Reach out to any founder that you would like to have a relationship with and explain the situation. And I guarantee you most will either say, yes, I can mentor you, or sorry, I don't have enough quality time to give, but here are 2 or 3 other people I would recommend you talk to. And once you're there, then everything else is easier, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, 100%. Moving into some of the more like quick fire sort of questions. So if you can think, like, what one thing has perhaps moved the needle the most for Whereby?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question actually specifically, and I can't find one specific thing or sort of like that silver bullet. It was always a huge amount of testing, iterating on something, and then finding what works, right? So it was always, and it's funny, I was speaking to a member of my team now that was saying, we've been battling for 2 years. And I almost said, well, and we will be battling for the next 2 years and the next 4 years. That's basically what this is all about. So I don't believe in those kind of silver bullets, if that makes sense. I think it's a process, and you iterate on it, and you really see what sticks and what doesn't. Like sort of like tongue in cheek, I would say, obviously the one thing that really did move the needle for Whereby was the surge in demand during the pandemic, right? But that's not something that we did, and it's not something that I want to emphasize in a sense, right?
Yeah, definitely not a repeatable sort of process.
Not a strategy, let's put it that way.
Yeah. What about the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I ever received was from one of our early stage investors who is still with us today. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's probably close to 75 today. A person that I really admire and look up to. And he basically said that when you're building a company, it's crucial that you bring your partner along for the journey. And I was really bad at this. I thought my job is to protect Tez, my wife, for all the hardships and all the stress and all the anxiety I'm feeling. I don't want her to take that on and carry that load. He said, no, you have to think about it differently. The more they know, the easier it is for them to understand what your priorities have to be, the easier it is for your family life. And it was nothing to do with how to build the company from a strategic perspective or anything like that. It was purely to help me understand that we do this as a family. It's not just me. And I still struggle with it, so don't get me wrong, but it's great advice.
I think everyone struggles with it, but it is great advice, because similarly, like, certainly during the hardest times, but often I kind of default to this, like after work, even if I had a good day, I don't really want to speak about work. I kind of want to like switch off. So I never really share like what's going on, whether if somebody's left or, you know, so on. So it's Gemma, my other half, will really have to kind of probe to like, get something kind of like out of me from work. And then maybe like after a few drinks on a Friday, I'll say, oh, like, had a shitty week or a great week or something like that. But in general, I try not to speak about it at all. And it's my default.
And it makes them feel left out and not part of the journey, right? And I think long term, that is hugely detrimental to the relationship. So doing it, actually, we should see that as an investment in our own relationship building, basically, right?
Agree.
Yeah.
What about the hardest thing? I mean, maybe we talked about some of this, but the hardest thing about being a CEO?
I think for me, it's always coming to terms that a huge part of my job is disappointing people. That disappointing other founders, it's disappointing team members, it's disappointing my shareholders, my investors. We actually have to get comfortable by being okay with disappointing other people, because it's part of the job. It's impossible for us to build something and do what we do and have everyone be fully content and absolutely delighted with us every step of the way. So for me, that is one thing that I keep coming back to still after 12 years, I really hate disappointing people. And I'm extremely competitive. So when I fail my team and I have to let them go, I take that extremely personal. When I disappoint our investors, then people that have believed in me and my team and what we're building, and I have to go back with a monthly investor report that sucks, I find that really, really challenging to do. But it is part of the job, and that being open with it and being better at being fine with disappointing others, I think, is where I still have a huge part to grow.
What about your daily routine? What does that look like?
So normally I will try to 3 days a week, I will get some exercise in the mornings. I block time in my calendar, but normally I do that so early that I can also help my kids with breakfast and prepare their lunch for school and so on. I normally start my day around 8 a.m. because then I get at least 1 hour of solid work with emails and follow-ups and things that I didn't get to the day before the rest of the team starts to really come into effect. And then normally it's quite a lot of meetings, not necessarily video meetings or phone meetings, but there's always something. We do a lot of async work and so on. So making sure that all the decisions that people need are taken. So I'm not blocking anyone. I really don't like the feeling of blocking my team from actually moving forward. So I try to get those done as quickly as I can. In the afternoon, our US team comes on. So I sort of like, we work quite a lot of hours because there's always a lot to do overall with the business. But then I try to get dinner with my family. That's not always I can make it, but at least 2-3 times a week, I try to make sure that I set aside an hour to actually sit down and have dinner. Like I mentioned, I have 2 days a week where I train the football team, coach them, which is great fun. And then normally it's another session in the evening, just catching up on Slack, speaking to my CPTO, Andy, who I work extremely close with. And then I sleep a minimum of 7.5 to 8 hours every single day. And I just make sure that happens. Yeah. My partner calls me the most boring person alive. And I think that's true. But in many ways, it's like being an athlete, right? Like I train quite hard and I work hard, and then I need time to recover. And the best way to do that is actually just charging and getting 8 hours of full charging every night.
How do you optimize for getting 7 to 8 hours sleep? Do you have a specific routine or things that you need to do and bed at a certain time and certain temperature, etc.?
Yeah, no, I wish that's my next hack. That's the temperature and the mattress and all that. But for now, I can actually make it work. So basically what I do is that I stop receiving any notifications after 10 in the evening. Mm-hmm. And I put my phone away around 10:15, maybe 10:30. And then I fall asleep super fast, right? Like even that's my super strength. Like even in the most challenging of times, I always I fall asleep quite easily. I wake up super early because I'm stressed, so that's the negative. But I really fall asleep quickly because I'm toast. I just need sleep.
Yeah. Sounds like you've got a busy day, so I can imagine that for sure.
Yeah.
Good stuff. And so in October, we've got SaaStock 2022 coming back in Dublin. You're speaking this year, so looking forward to seeing you again in person and having more conversations. What are you speaking about this year? What are you looking forward to? Yeah,
first of all, I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of great people. I see the lineup is amazing, and so many of them I know from before, so I'm very excited about that. Hopefully I'll meet some new people that are also on that list, or people that I haven't met before, make some new acquaintances. That's always the best part of those conferences. And I'm speaking about sort of like some of the topics that we've discussed here, like how can you do what you do and still have and protect your mental health and be optimistic about the future and push through and really get to the next level of your career or your business or stuff like that. And I think I'll share quite a few stories from whereby and some of the battle scars that I've definitely gotten over the last couple of years.
Well, looking forward to that. And I think it's going to be a great talk based on the conversation today and knowing you and your story. And I know we've said, and maybe I need to do something on it, but like founders should share these stories kind of more often. And actually, when you look at SaaStock, the conference agenda, and I don't have it in front of me, I think there's going to be a lot more growth stories and, these success stories than the mental health stuff. So perhaps we need to kind of cover more of that, or certainly do more of that, at future SaaStock conferences, because it's very important. So if we get people to talk about it, not only on the podcast, but, conferences, I think it's going to be very helpful for a lot of founders.
100%, and we can do both, right? That's my goal, right? Is that I think it's hugely valuable hearing other stories on how they've grown their business and how they've done things. Like, I pick up a tremendous amount of insights from listening to other founders. So I'm not saying that we should purely talk about our feelings and the mental health, but it should be part of the equation. And right now, I feel like it's sort of like taking a back seat when we should put it almost equal, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. And what about your favorite business book? And also, what are you currently reading, if you have time?
Yeah, so this is a classic, and I still keep coming back to this book as my absolute favorite. The Hard Things About Hard Things with Ben Horowitz. I think it's just an amazing, and it always puts a few things into perspective for me. So I've probably read that at least 10 times, but that one I really, really enjoy. Right now, I'm actually doing a personal growth project that is not reading, and that is trying to improve my writing skills. I absolutely suck at writing and being clear-minded and providing clarity in my thoughts. And so, like I said, Andy, who is my CPTO, he came from Amazon, and they have an amazing way of thinking about how you actually do writing in a good way that allows others to follow your thoughts and challenge them and create narratives. So I'm trying to pick up all these bits and pieces of how we can do better when writing, because I strongly believe that remote work is here to stay, and anything you can do to improve your writing skills will not only benefit you, will greatly benefit your colleagues. And like I said, I suck at it, so I need a lot of work, but that's a personal growth project for me.
Good. We're glad to hear you doing something like that and working on, weaknesses. And finally, Øyvind, where can people find you online and whereby?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter under the handle Øyvind Reed. So look me up and get in touch if there's anything I can do to be of help to anyone. Not on Facebook, so you won't find me there. But then also check out whereby.com for the latest on our service and our offering. It's way better than Zoom, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Good stuff.
That was the plug, okay?
Good stuff. I mean, you've got to get a plug in. You've got to. You waited to the end, but look, Øyvind, I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Looking forward to publishing this podcast and sharing it with the SaaStock audience, and likewise, looking forward to seeing you, again in October at SaaStock in Dublin, talking about Arsenal, talking about mental health, talking about growth, and good times and having fun. So looking forward to that. Thanks so much, Øyvind Reed, CEO of Whereby.
Thank you so much. All those topics are amazing, so I look forward to it. Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it. Thanks.